Hi, this is Ann Stoneson of Beginning Counselor, Building Your Ideal Internship. And today I'm going to be talking with you about 5 tips to help you ace your licensing exam. So if you've got a bad case of the exam jitters, if you're looking for a study break and you've exhausted all the cute cat videos on YouTube you can find, or if you're just looking for a little bit of encouragement and you're feeling a little stuck, you're in the right spot. My first tip to help you ace your licensing exam is to be friendly, not fearful. And what I mean by that is I want you to make friends with your test. There are a lot of different licensing exams out there, and you may be taking more than one if you're pursuing 2 licenses. So there's the NCE, the NCMHCE, there's the MFT exam. And so as you can tell from all these different names, there are a lot of different exams and they're formatted rather differently. So for example, the NCE is a 200 question multiple choice test with options A through D for each answer. So there's only 1 right answer and 3 wrong answers for each question. Now for the NCMHCE, it's a different story. For each clinical scenario you read about, there are a number of answers provided, and some of them are right and some of them are wrong. And so there's not just one right answer. So you can scoop up points by getting more and more of the correct answers for each sort of clinical vignette that you're having to interpret. So this, again, comes back to knowing what's expected of you for your test, knowing what you're testing for, make friends with your test, and understand the format. My second tip is a personal tip in that this may not work for everybody, but I recommend that you go for bite-sized, not binging. And what I mean by that is I want you to break your studying up into smaller chunks. Quite frankly, it's easier on the brain when you are absorbing information a bit at a time. And it's also more likely to get done. So if you are facing down a half-hour study session versus a 6-hour study session, it's much more likely that half hour is going to get done. It's just not as intimidating. So I don't know what this looks like for you. Maybe it's a stack of note cards on top of your toilet. Maybe it's CDs or some recordings that you listen to as you're running your errands each week. And you're just spending maybe 20 minutes listening to information and absorbing it. That's bite-sized, and that's more doable. So consider that when you're thinking about your study tactics for your licensing exam. My third tip is to aim to pass, not be perfect. The fact is, when you're in graduate school and undergrad too, you're often aiming to do the best you possibly can on your assignments and your tests, and the more points that you get, everybody wants to get that A+. When it comes to your licensing exam, nobody cares if you get an A+, so to speak. The main issue is whether you pass or not. So when you're studying for your exam, you just want to think about getting above the threshold. You just want to scoop up enough points to pass. So while it can be very easy to get bogged down thinking about all the information, if you are aiming for mastery of everything, then of course you're going to feel overwhelmed. So it might be better to, if you have a concept that you always get crossed, maybe if you're working on your family systems and you always get Bowen confused with Satir, and there's just that one theory that you always get crossed, don't panic. While that will be important to understand in your clinical work ongoing, a lot of people learn better in the room with clients and when they're applying things. So you may not be able to master that or get that clear in time for the test. That is okay. If there's a concept you just can't master, go on to the next one. Remember, you're just trying to scoop up enough points to pass. Also, I want to clarify too, along with tip number 3, is that the passing score is going to vary depending on the test. So this goes back to your first tip of make friends with your test, be friendly with it, know the format. So for the National Counseling exam, you only need a passing score of Usually it's somewhere in the 60 to 70% range. So do your research to know what range you're aiming for, and that way you're much more likely to be able to get above that threshold. My fourth tip is something that I've used reliably in the past with things that have made me feel very anxious. And I know a lot of you are feeling pretty anxious about your licensing exam, or you wouldn't be watching this video. So I want you to come up with some ridiculous rituals, some coping strategies that help you get through the day. So you've probably heard about using visualizations. There might be some relaxation or deep breathing techniques that you've learned as a counselor in training. It kind of makes sense that you'd have those in your back pocket, maybe. And if you don't, maybe now's the time to look into that some. And of course, the tip about eating a good breakfast and all that, that's all very lovely. And I love those recommendations. But I really think that humor is a beautiful antidote for fear and nerves. So I used this tip when I was defending my master's thesis back in graduate school. I was scared out of my mind, but the day of the test, as I was getting ready and getting dressed, I had this pair of fuzzy, silly socks with a bunch of cows on them that a dear friend had given me in graduate school. And I put on those socks, and I put on my boots, and I went and I kicked that defense's butt, because I knew I had cows on my feet. What could possibly go wrong? So maybe your tactic will look a little different from mine, but humor, if you can find some way to do some little something that uses humor, I think it will make everything a little less painful for you. And my last tip, tip number 5, if you don't ace the licensing exam on your first try, please don't despair. Please don't give up. This test does not gauge your skill or worth as a therapist or as a person. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people test well and some really struggle to test as well. And when you're anxious, you may not be able to show all that you know. Also, knowledge of theory is just one aspect of being a good therapist. There's a lot to be said for your presence in the room, that there are a lot of things that just can't be assessed in licensing exams. And so how you perform on this test really is not the be-all, end-all, even if it may feel like it in the moment and you may feel quite discouraged. So if you do not pass on your first try, try not to take it to heart too much. I know that can be easier said than done, but please remember that this test is just a test. So that's it, the 5 tips for acing your licensing exam. I hope this has been helpful to you. This is Ann Stoneson, a beginning counselor, building your ideal internship. Have a wonderful day and good luck.